Socially speaking, natality as a term can be a very good thing, but depending on times, it can also be a curse. Up till now, it has been a blessing in a way because natality means, in the end, people getting born, and it means replenishing and perpetrating your race. But the point is, everything that comes from misery, from ignorance, will also tend towards more misery because it is always seeking to be self sustainable. When you give birth to new children, especially in the Middle Ages and ancient times, where wars and expansion are very typical, having a great natality as a nation, as a race, or whatever, sub race, whatever people want to classify them as, that can always be a good thing. Because when you fight a war, the amount of new children that your mothers will give birth to will determine how big your armies are, in case you're not an empire. If you're an empire, then you're probably gonna sprawl over several countries, and as that happens, you're gonna have where to get new soldiers, be it forcefully or simply in more, let's say, peaceful ways. But when it comes to life in general, the biggest problem about natality is showing up nowadays. When you look, for example, at Asia, Asia has always had big populations and a tendency to have great natality. And it's been a curse for humanity in general, and especially for those countries, because when you give birth to children in a land of misery, you're gonna end up having more monsters than the previous generations. Say you've got 10,000 people. These 10,000 people, let's say they're equal men and women, and they form, let's say, 5,000 families. Each of these, if they have, well, 5 children, they will be 25,000 people, right? Should be 25,000 children, and with their parents, there should be 30,000. But let's say their parents, let's say they perish, or we don't take into account, there's 25,000 people, children. If you grow these children in a place of misery where they're going to be pulled down, they're never going to feel enough, and society will also reject them and have strict expectations about them, they will more or less end up as monsters or failures of society. This thing will perpetrate, and these children, 25,000, let's say some of them won't make it because, well, Middle Ages and antiquity, let's say that 10,000 survive, right? No, 20,000 will survive. Well, these 20,000, if they have 4 children each, well, that's gonna be, well, a lot, right? There's gonna be 40,000 more children, right? Because 10,000 families and times 4, 40,000 children, right? Let's rule out the parents yet again, and then you've got 40,000 children. If these, again, are going to be treated miserably, probably even more miserable than their previous generation, they're going to be convinced again that this is the only way that life is. And, well, if all of these survive, or let's say 30,000 of them survive, they will make 15,000 families, should their numbers be equal. If they have, let's say, 5 children again, each, or let's say 4, well, 50,000 times 4, well, will be 60,000. And, exponentially the numbers will increase. This will be, in a way, a problem. Because what's happening in Asia, in a way, especially the Middle East and, well, especially China and Japan, where Confucianism has had a great major impact, let's say, to augment it a lot. Well, the biggest problem was Confucianism, in a way, taught you that you have to take care of your vassals, of the people who are under you, but at the same time, they have to use all of their resources and do whatever they can in order to make sure that you also can live a good life. In a way, this sounds similar to the medieval system in Europe. But the cultural system has been induced so strongly in people's minds that it was their way of life. You can take Japan, for example. In World War II, they would do literally anything for their emperor. And not only the emperor, any higher up. If their higher up would tell them, look, there's the enemy, even if you're technologically inferior, you have to beat that enemy, well, they would simply gladly give up their lives because that was their highest honor. Nowadays, you are seeing the pains of that because the biggest trouble of such a system, where you give all your resources to a society, you perpetrate this so your children, the next generations, will find it harder and harder to resist it, and they will live more and more mechanically in these patterns. Well, the problem is, what do you do when society no longer wants you? It kind of never wanted you because ultimately, especially in the older times, people were way more self-centered. They were way more attached to their idea, to their illusions, to their what they think they were, and those people wouldn't care much about the people under. Obviously, there were exceptions, but when the exception is 10% of the masses, well, the next generation will probably be 8%, and then the next 5 generations later, let's say, it will be probably 5%, and then 10 generations later, it'll be probably 2%, because misery you know, will become more and more prominent, and it will be harder to resist. So it will be harder and harder to find good quality people. Sure, you might say you don't believe me, but look at today's times. We've got vaccines, we've got medication, we've got so many more things that the ancient and the medieval world didn't have. Our natality probably is equal to those same times, but we have way more means through which we can keep people alive, especially children who are more vulnerable to diseases. And with a lot of the diseases of the past, which were deadly diseases, like we can talk about syphilis and the Black Plague, nowadays you don't see any one of those because we've got the means, medically and scientifically, to deal with those with quite some ease, let's say. So nowadays you have 8 billion people. I don't know who counted all of the people in the world, but let's say it's truly 8 billion people. All of these people, they are far more miserable because misery stacks, just like debuffs in a video game. And it becomes more prominent. It becomes harder and harder for the future generations to resist. Not only that, but they also become the police people of misery, right? Haven't you seen when you're in a miserable environment, everyone congratulates you when you're doing the same thing as them. The moment you want to do something for yourself, oh, God forbid you try to do that because everyone is going to pull you down, right? You're not good enough, you're not going to make it, it's way too complicated, why not be like us, and all sorts of miserable emotional plays. So natality can backfire pretty badly. What you see nowadays, especially in the East, is a society like Japan probably does. They also have quite a big population, but if you look at China, China unfortunately reached a level where morality is quite low. Morality, not the morals. The morals are also low because the people have realized long time ago that society doesn't care about them, yet they carried on with the lie. Nowadays they are simply slaves of their society, of the cyber society where you're tracked and traced everywhere and you're not allowed to say anything, you can't do anything on your own without the system knowing. So they have little power. Well, they kind of have power, but they're all too demoralized to do that. If you look in Asia, that's kind of also happening in a way because people are starting to realize all over the world that your religion doesn't care much about you, your politics especially don't care much about you, because in a way religion can be your savior. In many places where religion is strong, it can be a good savior for people because in many countries, especially the poor countries or countries that were stomped on by other empires, like for example my country, well, their religion was kind of the only treasure they had, right? Because ultimately, your resources, your geographical resources, your individual resources, those could always dwindle. They could always be stripped from you. But your belief, it's not as easy to strip. You can destroy, let's say, a Muslim country, you can take their mosques, but the people's faith is gonna stay there even several generations after. And they can be, the country can be a Jewish one as well, they can be mainly Christian, it doesn't matter. You take their faith away, it's gonna still linger for a long, long time. Because look at the West Europe, the new LGBT religion, well, it stripped a lot of Catholicism, but still there are a lot of people who take onto it, right? So, and obviously the people who lost it longer time ago and they just go on with the system. Well, the system always separates itself, always cleans itself because it never will allow too many people to follow it. So as I was saying, this was just a short point on how natality can influence us and why in the end we are so miserable generation upon generation. And well, as this has been going on, this has been a growing problem because ultimately, generation of generations of generations of misery. Well, children nowadays, you can see it in the last generations, Gen Z, for example. Everyone's saying that they're a failure, but the people who say that, they are usually their parents. Their parents should look in the mirror and ask themselves, how much of a failure are you? Because your child is directly your product. Your child ends up mostly as the structure that you give them in a family. Simple-minded people, people with, let's say, even low genetics, they won't be able to create much of a genius. They probably can create a genius, but the problem is, even if a child is a genius, if they are born in an environment that is bad, they're also not going to evolve much, right? Because it's not hard for a genius to evolve, right? You just need to be in an environment which doesn't want you, doesn't support you, and well, decline is gonna take place, right? Entropy and evolution, they're all, you know, in a way, they're kind of the same way. We call them entropy, or the tendency towards chaos. Well, naturally speaking, it is just evolution. Things can evolve in a way or in a direction which we don't like, so we will give it some negative meaning, but it is still evolution. If you take an idiot and you make a genius out of them, it is evolution. If you let an idiot in an environment of idiots, well, all those idiots will become greater idiots. It is still evolution. You can call it involution if you want, but meaning is subjective. So people will fight for their own points of view, but ultimately, this whole curse of humanity is going on and on and on. It doesn't matter what creed you have, what religious ideas, what sports ideas, what political ideas you have. This whole karma is reflecting up upon us all. It is upon all of our shoulders because it's whatever a generation cannot transcend, it will be given to the next generation. It is easy to simply stay miserable and expect your children to do all the work. You're seeing it in parents nowadays. They don't care about their children. They're way too dumb, many of them, to simply have children. And some of them do it because peer pressure, because of their parents, because of their neighbors, nagging them to do that. And ultimately, they end up having children. And well, unfortunately, there exist mobile phones, computers, all sorts of ways through which we can distract your child and have them not cry in your head, or all sorts of these things that frustrated people will do to their children. Then they will end up thinking why their children don't like them. Well, how much attention have you been giving your child, right? Your child is not a toy. You don't own your child, right? Your child belongs to the society that you gave them birth in. And if the society is miserable, then you should ask yourself, are you actually letting greater monsters than you in this society? Because in that case, you should be treated almost similar to those people who have committed genocides, right? This is the main and should be the main priority and responsibility of women. Because as a woman, how you keep your physical body is of utmost importance. Because let's say, if your body is of a certain vibration, it can house a certain uh, quality of life force, right? The life force, or the soul, let's say, as you want to call it, the life force, the piece of life that will come and inhabit your child's body, right? It will be of a certain vibration compatible to the vibration of your body. If your body is trashy, well, you will attract a certain piece of life. It can be a genius still, but probably it will have self-destructive behaviors. It can be an idiot, probably with some genius tendencies, but your genetics will have a great impact in most times of their life on your children as well. Sure, genetics can be transcended with the right spiritual purposes and the such, but it's gonna take time. And whatever takes time and lasts a lot of time, um, it needs patience. That's a rare resource that you can barely find nowadays in people because everyone is trashing their minds up with all sorts of videos. The more reels you watch, the more videos you watch on TikTok and the such, well, that's a problem because you're going to overload your mind, your subconscious mind, and well, your subconscious mind, until it cleans itself of those residues and makes them less important, you're going to be bugged constantly by those memories that you had. Obviously, in your conscious mind, you've definitely forgotten how many videos you've seen by today, or, most of them anyways, right? But your unconscious mind does not, and it will clean itself. But it will take a long time until that process. So you will simply feel on edge all the time. You will feel that you can't sit still, because once you overload your mind, it's like an engine of creation, right? When you take one of those AI picture generators, right? You give them a few prompts and it will give you a correct picture. You give them 100 prompts, well, the picture will look like shit, right? The character will probably have 6 hands, or I don't know, all sorts of quirky things will happen to the pictures, right? Similarly, your mind is, except your mind is a machine a bazillion times more complex than that. Scientists only know, let's say, probably 10% of how it functions. The others, probably they're inventing things or whatever. And all these children that we're calling a failure, we're probably definitely gonna give birth to greater monsters than us. You should think about it. Because what you teach your children, well, they will behave on that. Remember when children were forced to wear face masks in the pandemic, right? They were crying that they couldn't breathe. Well, congratulations, you idiot adults. You've just taught them that in case some other event like this happens, this is how they will behave to you. So if you get old and something like that happens, don't be surprised if they're gonna force you to wear a face mask, and you know, you might cry that you can't breathe. Well, sucks to be you, I guess. That's how you taught your children. Perhaps when you're gonna be old, your children will have more emotions than you, and probably they won't act like that. So you only made their life more miserable because they have to, purge through your incapabilities. But ultimately, you know how things are. The incapabilities of a generation, well, in many cases will become the capabilities of the degeneration that comes after, right? Because you teach a child badly, they will become a bad politician, a bad police person, a person without morals. It doesn't matter where they end up, right? The disabilities of someone capable, well, as I call it in a cheeky way, can easily become the abilities of a mentally disabled person, right? The or idiots, or whatever you want to call them, okay? And well, this natality is dwindling. You will see the population of China will slowly dwindle. It will, well, specialists say it will halve by 2030. I'm not sure. I mean, at least the natality, not the population. The population will also go down a lot. A lot of the people will die because, well, the system wants a lot of people to die, right? Don't forget the New World Order had a specific number for each country that their population was wanted to have, right? And well, those plans won't work, but some fuckers can wet their pants all they want. But if people don't stand up for their own rights, well, they will have the rest of their life to cry for everything and every freedom that they lost. Remember, every 10 years, back in the times, every 10 years, they would tell you that something bad would happen, that glaciers will melt, that the ozone layer will be destroyed, and all sorts of this and that. Every 10 years there was a new lie and an agenda. All those agendas ended up in nothing happening, but there were more restrictions, right? There were more laws, there were more rules against you, there were more taxes, and even more taxes, and even more taxes, just hoaxes, right? So yeah, even in when you look at Europe and America, right? You see a lot of the modern women nowadays. They just prefer, cats and dogs. They don't like having families anymore because a lot of people see they have family issues. They've got mommy, daddy issues, and the problem with all of these issues, you end up feeling unworthy of the other gender. Okay? This is the foundation of LGBT agenda. Why do you think LGBT is so successful? Because after sowing discord and discontent in all the peoples throughout the hundreds of years that these fuckers have been, the so-called rulers of the world have been treating humans, and society has treated people miserably. How you ruin a society is always pick on the women. If you pick on women and make them miserable, well, they will have miserable bodies. So they will invite through their womb, when they become pregnant, they will invite lower qualities of life. which will amount to the future idiots that you see in society. People who don't have any morals, they don't care about anything, they're just walking zombies, more or less. Bots, whatever you want to call them. These people will obviously make similar children, and usually these people will live in poverty. Poverty knows the greatest of natalities, right? So that is a problem. These people are not educated, although education can be questionable in general, but well, when they are not educated, it's hard to teach them higher things because, well, you have to teach them their language, you have to teach them, their language in better ways, more profound ways. You have to teach them their writing, their reading, all sorts of new things, and their history and the such, because, well, the biggest problem is if you don't know your history, your true history, not the one necessarily written in books, because, well, nowadays you have to question everything. So natality can be a curse as well. Nowadays the population will balance themselves out in a way because, modern women prefer to cry that nobody's giving them attention, but at the same time they're calling men trash, and they're claiming through idiotic feminism that, they can do everything equally as well as men. Well, some cases probably, but I really want to see all those feminists, working some of the stinkiest and most horrible jobs that men do, because, everyone wants to be a man until you give them the shovel, right? I really want to see some of those feminist women, weld pipes in the middle of a storm, in the middle of an ocean, on an oil rig, for example. Oh, I definitely want to see that. I'd pay big money to see that. Or basically, I'd go for free because misery is always free. So, you know, I'd enjoy that show. I would need a truckload of popcorn actually, and probably some pizza. Yes, so pizza would do great. And where could they actually work? Oh yes, the sewers. The sewers would actually be a great thing. I've been in the sewers for 11 months. I've actually gone inside them. So all I can say is, yeah, I want to see those work. Or street cleaner. There are some devices that are special to remove chewing gum, for example, that is glued to the pavements. Oh, definitely, they're gonna love the smell. They're gonna love the smell of dissolved chewing gum. So, all of these people nowadays who think that separation is the best thing, well, they will live their misery, they will, well, probably evolve more, but ultimately, I can say the populations will dwindle. No more children for a certain period of time will mean that, well, less miserable people. See, before you have a family, it is better to simply spend a while, especially from 20 to 30 years of age. Spend a while and see what are your capabilities, what do you truly want to do in your life. And you have to understand that most of the people you will like are almost always gonna be a karmic attraction. You're gonna like that girl or that guy because it's a karmic attraction, something that is not fulfilled. Ask yourself, what is it that you're liking about that person? Because a lot of the younglings, they kind of end up in the same cycles of their parents. They end up with people who don't represent them, and they're gonna live a miserable life. I'm looking around and I'm seeing all sorts of so-called families, people who are, married, and, it's a complete mess. Someone is more dominant, the other one just obeys, and, well, that's not a family, that's a prison. So natality has been like this. It has been the result of such families, and the children nowadays, the Gen Z, Gen A, whatever you're calling them, they're gonna suffer through this. A lot of them will, but they are a bit more sensitive, yes. And this sick society sucks when it comes to emotions because, well, you can't expect emotions from sociopaths and narcissists who rule this society or who wet themselves that they rule this society, right? You can't expect that. You can't expect some, like most of the dumb teachers, to actually have emotions and, teach things through emotion and make their classes attractive. No, they're just gonna teach their shit in a mechanical way, hoping that you're gonna learn them and learn them word by word, not by heart, because, people are simply primitive. The quality of teachers. See, I always said we don't need many more teachers nowadays. We need people who have a talent into pedagogy, or what you call it in English. People who know how to teach, not just to teach, because tomorrow an AI program will come and will simply replace all teachers. It's not much of a hard problem, especially if you take, for example, the sciences, right? They are fixed, right? All the theorems of nowadays will be probably the same tomorrow and in 100 years. Probably in 100 years there will be more because science will develop, but they're mechanical. They can be taught by a robot or by a software that can present things in a very engaging way. I can make one of those in RPG Maker. It's easy peasy. Yeah, it will take time, but I can handle that alone. Right? Imagine some people in a company actually doing that. Well, that would be good. I was interested actually in doing some of these things, and probably I would try. But the problem is, I need people to do me the cartoons and the such. So all this being said, this all goes around misery and generational misery and perpetration of misery, because up till now, people have perpetrated misery more than they have perpetrated the race. Yeah, we're still here as humans, we're still kicking, but you know, why is it that 99% of the people are miserable? Why is it that 99% of the people are poor and 1% are not? Well, because 1% invest their time in a different way. They still have 24 hours a day, but they read a lot and they read what is needed, right? They make use of their time in productive ways. The 99% are many of them uneducated or they're not interested in doing things to improve their life, right? That is a big problem. And well, misery and poverty, they're always hand in hand. And above misery, there will be some rich, miserable fuckers, right? Because, well, bigger the miserable people who know how to make use of the others, well, they will reach higher positions, and others who are more capable than them will reach higher positions above them. And then you get a pyramid of misery, and well, that's kind of how it all ends, right? So hopefully this video raised a bit of awareness. You are appreciated, enjoy life, and well, this being said, take care. Ferenc Board signing out.